Glad to have you back. It is TVC Breakfast and it's time for our second big story. Nigeria-China relation dates back to the 70s when both countries decided to partner in trade and develop diplomatic relations.
And now, many years after, Nigeria and China are still working to achieve a mutually beneficial partnership. And we'll take this report to lay a foundation for our discussion now.
China, led by President Xi Jinping, is seeking to enhance strategic partnership with Africa's biggest economy. The two heads of state already held meetings in Beijing where they highlighted the importance of collaborating in order to bolster bilateral ties. China's loan to Nigeria will aid the country in diversifying its economy. And to help achieve this, China has vowed to fully support the West African country through infrastructural development and capacity building. Nigeria has been in talks with China on an infrastructure loan for months. Africa's largest economy is facing its worst economic crisis in years, pegged on the tumbling of global oil prices. The two economic powerhouses will also deepen cooperation in other sectors like agriculture, fishery, oil refining, and mineral development.
All right, joining us from our Abuja studio is the president of Nigeria Entrepreneurs Forum, Dr. Sydney Inegbedion. Dr. Sydney, good morning. It's good to have you join us right now.
I'm pleased to be with you this morning.
All right. Now, first of all, let us start this way. There are lots of world powers, bigger developed countries, having interest in African countries. Nigeria is part of it, it's not left out. Now, when it comes to exploitation, there are so many people who feel or perceive that what interest these or developed countries have in developing countries, the interest is exploitative in nature. What is different about with China, if it is different in that regard?
Well, Nigeria has the largest population in Africa and also the most populated black country on earth. Nigeria is endowed with a lot of human and natural resources which are needed by the developed societies. And these are the attracting forces that brings people to this country. They want to exploit our market, they want to exploit our talents, and they also want to advance their interests within our territorial space. Essentially, these are the reasons. But in the course of global engagement, Nigeria as a nation must also look at its own interests in the equation. Because there's something they call the quest for more in the global community. And that is every country try to exploit the advantages they could from any country they see fit. And this is exactly why you see Nigeria is being attracted to other developed societies. Not only that, you find that our sub-regional strength is another advantage. Once you are able to tap into the Nigerian market, it gives you additional access to other countries.
Yeah, we are so attracted to China that the BBC in 2014 declared Nigeria as the most pro-Chinese nation in the world, with 80% of Nigerians just so happy to
85%,
just so happy to work with China and do business with China. How can that trend be a win-win situation?
Well, it can be a win-win situation depending on the way Nigeria accepts the relationship. What we've had is that prior to our engagement with China, we were strong with the Western nations. But over the course of time, you realize that the Western nations were no more taking us seriously. Especially in the 90s, you realize that when Nigerians were going to US and Europe for businesses, they were subjected to all kinds of heinous incidences, which was not really attractive to Nigerians. It became necessary for Nigerians to start looking for alternative market, and of course, that was when China came in. And Chinese products to Nigerians were very competitive, they were cheaper, and the Chinese, as a people, were being a developing country like Nigeria, they were very, very nice to Nigerians. And so that sort of attracted Nigerians to move towards the Orient. And that has been sustained. But while we are sustaining that, we also discover that the trade volume has increased. Where they are in deficit with us because we export oil to them. But when you look at what we are importing from them, consumer goods, electronics and day-to-day activities, then recently we start getting into heavy machineries, infrastructural equipment purchases and all of that. These ones enhances their growth. But when you now look at the relationship, the benefits of this relationship, the question is, who is benefiting more? Well, on the bilateral level, you will say both of us are benefiting because for our people, they are able to have market they are accessing. But we could do more because if you look at Chinese market, which is about 1.5 billion, if Nigeria is able to move products to that country, it's just 10% of access to the Chinese market will make Nigeria to be a very, very big country, bigger than we are now. We are big in terms of consumerism, we are big in terms of being able to buy things, but we ought to be big economically by also exporting a lot of things to China. We also be big by letting Chinese investors come in and partner with us. Presently, they are really not partnering with us because if you look at their investment pattern, the Chinese come in with their money, they set up the businesses and they employ Nigerians. I mean, if you look at the industries where they are, you realize that even at managerial level, Nigerians are not put in strategic positions. So we are really not benefiting from the appropriate technology transfer. Even at the end, the lower cadre employees they take, they are not given the proper human treatment, as it were. So these are some of the areas. But that does not mean that the Chinese are too happy. There are also a lot of areas where the Chinese are very, very uncomfortable with Nigeria. You look at the arrivals, if you go to the airport, you look at the arrivals, Chinese are most likely to face insecurities because our immigration laws and everything tends to be stringent on them. Even the visas issued to them usually doesn't let them stay in Nigeria that long. And once they are in Nigeria, they apply for our citizenship and green cards and all other things they think they benefit. They are not really given to them. So these are some of the issues I think gradually we need to look into in terms of the bilateral relations.
Sydney, I think the feeling is mutual really because Nigerians too complain about the short visa that they get from a Chinese government, and there are particular cases of some kind of maltreatment and racism going on in Guangzhou region. I don't know if you've heard about that. Some Nigerians not well treated. Some Nigerians who are Muslim can't even practice what they believe in the open in that part of the region. Can you confirm that if you've heard anything about that?
Well, incidentally, I have been to many of the Chinese cities. I've been to Guangzhou, I've been to Beijing, their capital, I've been to Nanjing, I've been to Xi'an, I've been to Sydney, I've been to so many Chinese cities. But specifically, we're talking about Guangzhou. This is the area whose climatic condition and economic activities is very similar to Lagos. A lot of Nigerians tend to do business in Guangzhou. We have the Nigerian business community well established in Guangzhou. But you also realize that much of the problems Nigerians face in Guangzhou is that Nigerians leave Nigeria, going to China, thinking that when they get there, they are going to be able to get jobs. As we used to do with Western Europe and the United States, where you go there with nothing, you struggle, and then of course you're able to capitalize, and then of course integrate yourself into the system, and then of course you grow from there. But China, like I said, with their population, they need the jobs. They don't have the jobs to give foreigners, especially when the Chinese are ready to accept the most menial job. Then this leaves Nigerians that enter China without money to be in financial crisis. Indeed, the few of them that have been successful are people that have worked under the cover or get married to Chinese citizens. Then of course they're able to get the appropriate papers and then indulge in trading, and then of course have grown in the process. But here again, some of these people that are into trading needs protection. But the protection, you don't expect it to come from the Chinese. First, it has to come from Nigeria. You have Nigerian consular offices in Guangzhou, Nigerian embassy in Beijing, And these people are not as responsive to Nigerians the way they ought to be responsive to them, because I have seen both of them, I have talked to both of them, both sides of the coin. You also realize that the opportunities Nigerians give to Chinese easily, the access to market easily, also impede on the success of Nigerians there. The last time I was in Guangzhou, I realized that the Nigerian business community had a major problem on hand. What was the problem? Some Nigerians have gathered money and they have been able to acquire a market, which is like a 4-story building, and then with stores, and where they were able to open up places where they sell things, and Nigerians come, they go straight to that market, and then buy things cheap, and then ship to Nigeria. Incidentally, the man that owned that building realized what Nigerians were doing. The man came to Nigeria here, rented an office in Lagos, and then was now shipping directly to Nigeria, went back to Guangzhou, and then shut down the building and asked Nigerians to move out. Of course, that was a major setback. Who was supposed to respond to that? It is the Nigerian government, the consular office in Guangzhou, that's supposed to step in. Because at that level where Nigerians will be able to put money together, integrate into the system, and then start developing themselves like the Chinese, because they need support. So these are some of the things we need to consider. But we must also look at it from our own personal angle, the Nigerian angle. Most Nigerians that go to China, like I said, they come there undercapitalized, unprepared, and in the process want to embark on shortcuts to be able to make do and start doing things. I think we need to develop our own skills to be able to interface with the rest of the world. I think we need to also be able to follow the laws of foreign countries, because most Nigerians are arrested there, and if you look at the reason why they are arrested, of course you cannot blame the host countries. Other people don't allow foreigners to be free, just as we allow foreigners to be free in Nigeria. So a lot of education needs to be done in most cases on the part of Nigerians that are wanting to emigrate to other countries, to understand that rules and regulations of foreign countries need to be protected, need to be respected, and of course for you to be able to develop and grow in their countries. But they are not going to just let you come in and do things the way you do in Nigeria, which I see many of them doing there.
Dr. Nigbedion, we'll come back to you shortly. Let's go on a break and then we'll come to dwell on this. We're discussing Nigeria-China relations, and we have with us the President, Nigeria Entrepreneurs Forum, Dr. Sidney Nigbedion, with us from Abuja studio. Let's go on a break. We'll be back. Right, thanks for staying with us on TVC Breakfast. We're discussing Nigeria-China relations right now. And just in a few minutes, we'll be going on the news update. But however, we have with us the President of Nigeria Entrepreneurs Forum, Dr. Sidney Nigbedion, joining us from Abuja. Now, let me come to you still on this before we go on a break briefly. Now, tell us how the government is engaging the private sector in pushing the Nigerian agenda, strategic agenda, because basically in all of these relations, they soar on the wings or on the shoulders of the private sector. Can you talk to us about that?
Well, an MOU was signed by the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment around 2006, 2005 to get the Chinese heavily involved in trade, commerce, and related activities. That showed that the Nigerian government quite understand the role in engaging China in its economic activities. The ministry also has encouraged private sector-led organizations. I know of Nigerian-China Business Council that have been on the forefront on these matters. And of course, Nigerian Entrepreneur Forum has also continuously enjoyed support from the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment in our interest in doing a lot of business with China. Of course, the Chinese also tend to have recognized our strength in the field. I know we are one of the institutions that prepares Nigerian businesses for their Canton Fair, and we accredit Nigerian businesses, and then of course the Chinese people, the Chinese embassy in Nigeria issues the visa, and then as they go there, we monitor their activities, and if there is need for follow-up of their bilateral trade negotiations and activities, then of course they come back to us and we follow up through Nigerian relevant government institutions and also Chinese relevant institutions.
All right. Now let me put you on hold briefly. Let's go on a break and then we come back. You certainly will continue with the point you're making. All right, let's go on with our discussion on Nigeria-China relations. We have been talking with Dr. Sidney Inegwedion. He is the president of Nigeria Entrepreneurs Forum. Now, let's get back to our discussion. Before we went on the updates for the news, I asked, you were making a point as to how the Nigerian government is engaging the private sector in that strategic relations with China.
Yes, I had highlighted the role of the Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment and its desire to assist the private sector-led organizations to engage with Chinese companies, and giving impetus from the government. These organizations, including Nigerian Entrepreneur Forum, have actively been engaged in the economic activities between Nigeria and China. But beside that, you also realize that the Nigerian Customs and Immigration have also been heavily involved in engaging or participating in the economic process by facilitating the necessary governmental roles in people-to-people movement of businesses and the regulatory measures for the goods they are transporting. I think this is the area where government have also come in. But the area where government need to come in the more now has to do with the contemporary dynamics of the global change. You realize that since the President Donald Trump of U.S. came in and his protectionist tendencies, this is realigning the global economic terrain. China is positioning itself to becoming the world leader, so to speak, and also they are strengthening their policies, and they are also trying to acquire additional market and strengthen relationship with many countries. They are coming up with initiatives that were not there before. I do know that recently the Chambers of Commerce of Nigeria from different states, including Nigerian Entrepreneurs Forum, were invited to a meeting in the Economic Counselor's office of the Embassy of China in Nigeria, and they unfolded a lot of initiatives that they are about to start implementing in Nigeria relating to how Nigerian businesses will do business with them or engage with them. And here again is where I believe that Nigerian government need to begin to start articulating its own agenda in the global realignment effort relating to trade and economic activities between nations. I just don't believe that Nigeria should just begin to open its door to everybody to come in and do whatever they want to do, because protectionism is now going to be the order of the day. I believe that Nigerian government need to come up with initiative to support the private sector the more, so that our companies can now start beginning to embark on production. The bottom line is that if you do not have, you will have to be imported from other countries. And it is because we see Chinese product being cheaper that Nigeria decided to be going to China. But most of the things we are importing from China, these are things that the private sector in Nigeria can do. All we need is just have recognition that most of all these equipment for making these consumer goods are being fabricated in Nigeria. And so we need to give assistance to fabricators, we need to give assistance to producers, we need to support government, to support private sector for whatever they are doing. I don't really think we are having that kind of support in this country. What we are having is large government dominance. And in the world of tomorrow, the role of government is being diminished, and Nigeria should not be an exception. I think we should stop paying lip service to the private sector and begin to strengthen the private sector in this country. This is the only way we can compete in the emerging global market.
All right, Doctor. well, Sydney will bring in Foladele now to tell us what Nigerians are saying. But when we come back from Foladele's wall, then we'll take more on the specific economic activities, looking at export and import and the effect of that on the private sector. So it is time for Foladele to
Fola, let's bring you in here.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Salami. Good
Nice to
morning,
see you.
Sydney. Okay, so there was a poll in 2014 that actually said that 85% of Nigerians were pleased with China-Nigeria relations. So let's see if that still stands in
So
2017.
Nigeria becomes the most pro-China country in the world. Wow,
yeah.
that's big.
So let's see. Shola Animashaun says, it's time for China to further their global dominance. Therefore, it is smart for Nigeria. It is smart that Nigeria has close relations with the new king on the block. And I know Sydney touched on that just before I came, about how China is on its way to world dominance. Adeomi Emoruwa says, so Nigeria is Africa's largest economy. It's just a pawn in the hands of China in their bid to bring fear to Taiwan and games with Trump. Bad. And Adeomi continues and he says, we have more to trade with the US than China, which we trade crude oil and natural resource with. Think tech, arts, culture, food, or aid. Juliet Kego says, there's a lot we can learn from China, and as weakened as our economy is, when we improve, may we apply learnings from China in our policies. And the last one here from Tam, who says, but when it comes to business, Nigeria and China are alike in one inspiring and infectious way. Okay? We still have Sydney, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good morning, Sydney. Good morning, Sydney.
I know he can hear you. Just go ahead.
So, Sydney, so someone earlier said, oh, well, China is on its way to world dominance and Nigeria would be wise to team up with China on that. But then someone else says, oh, China is only trying to use Nigeria on its way to becoming world or king in the world. What do you make of that?
Well, I think we both have potentials. You must understand that. Nigeria is the largest country in terms of trade potential in the African sub-region, just as China is in the Asian sub-region. But when you look at the decision-making process relating to economy, the Chinese are stronger. The Chinese are very aggressive in marketing the products of their companies. Nigerians are very weak here. We do not strengthen the private sector in this country to the extent that we support their global activities. And in the global market, if you do not have the support of your country, then of course you are at a weaker point. You can really not compete. But if you have the backing of your country, then you get stronger. You get the resources. You get the support you need to be able to grow. I can cite an example here. When Dangote was growing, he got the enormous support of the Obasanjo's administration and the Goodluck Jonathan's administration. But what we have now, we have emerged the biggest company in Africa, you know, because of the support. But you also realize in Indewi, with the Indosin Motor, have been in partnership with the Chinese, the assembly all kinds of vehicles and everything. But has Nigerian government patronized that company to the extent that we can now say we have a very formidable domestic auto manufacturing company to the extent we can now assist them to export to other African countries and possibly re-enter China. These things are not happening.
All right,
So,
Dr. Sydney Negbedion, let me put you on hold again. We have to go on this break before we come back. Stay with us on TVC Breakfast.
And Foladele is going.
And Foladele has to go now.
Glad to have you back. It is still TVC Breakfast, and we are talking China-Nigeria relations. And with us in our Abuja studio is Dr. Sydney Inigbedion, who is the president of Nigeria Entrepreneur Forum. Dr. Sydney, just a while ago, we're trying to look at specifics now in terms of economic activities and the effect of our trade in terms of volume of trade and balance of trade. Let's look at the textile industry, for instance. Nigeria market has been flooded with cheap fabrics coming from China, and you know that in that particular sector, about 145 companies are either shut down or are moribund. How can that help, really, in terms of relations? You're flooding my market and I can make headway.
Well, like I said, much of these things revolve around domestic policies. We have had a lot of companies, textile companies, and who were the people that owned these companies? We must also look at that. They were largely Chinese and they were largely Indians. Then, of course, Nigeria was providing the yarn, the cotton, and those things. So, if these companies are in Nigeria and Nigerian government allows importation of textile products into the country, of course, not on the short term you might be happy, but on the long term you will naturally lose. That is why protectionist policies are very, very important in trade. And what Nigeria needed to do is to emphasize on domestic production of these materials and encourage Nigerians to be wearing Nigerian-made clothes, no matter how they think they are, and discourage the use of foreign textile materials. And then, of course, if foreign materials, textile materials to come up with protective tariffs to stop the importation of these textiles. So I think largely it is the Nigerian responsibility rather than the Chinese. The Chinese are aggressively looking for markets, and where the market is weak in terms of policy, then of course they take advantage of you. It's just the global game, not only Chinese. If Nigeria is able to develop market in a country and they realize the people are buying their products, they are unhindered, then of course the tendency to aggressively move those products into those countries are there. But if the country has some restrictive measures, then of course they will, to enable them to protect their domestic production, then of course they will not do it. This is exactly what I said earlier. The Chinese government are aggressively moving their products, and Nigeria seems to be a fighter grounds. Nigerian government must also, of necessity, recognize that we must assist our businesses. We must have programs as to where we are going in terms of economic development.
All right.
If Nigeria will do better if we embark on, also just like the whole country is the whole world is doing, protectionism. Look at our domestic market. Take advantage of our domestic market. Strengthen our manufacturing base. Then, of course, Nigeria will not be where we are now.
Okay, we'll come back to this. Let's get you some basic foundation of information in here. Now, China, a major world power, is one of Nigeria's important trading and export partners. Now, the relationship between the two countries dates back to February the 10th, 1971, when both countries established bilateral ties.
Since then, relations between Nigeria and China have evolved remarkably, with both countries partnering in different areas of mutual benefit. The establishment of relations also led to the exchange of several visits by leaders of both countries. Nigeria is one of China's largest trading partners in Africa. Nigeria exports oil, wood, agricultural produce such as cotton, palm oil, seeds, and cashew nuts, among others, to China.
Now, Nigeria-China relations go beyond diplomatic relations with the influx of Chinese goods in Nigerian markets. China is Nigeria's major exporter of electrical appliances, machinery, mechanical appliances, and vehicles. Now, the total bilateral trade volume between China and Nigeria from 2014 to 2015 is about $101 billion. That's according to the General Administration of Customs of China.
The relations between the two countries went a notch further in April 2016, when the two countries signed a currency swap deal, an arrangement to trade in naira and yuan, paying for export and import trade at predetermined rates of exchange without the use of a third currency like the dollar. Sydney, a good place to ask you this question now, since we'll make yuan one of our official currency in Nigeria. How far do you think that has helped the Nigerian economy?
When the President Buhari went to China to negotiate the swap deal for $6 billion US dollars, and it was heralded because we thought it was going to assist the common business person that goes to China to import, instead of having to use naira to buy dollar in a very high rate, and then of course convert it to yuan and buy their commodities to Nigeria. We felt the swap deal was a very sweet deal for Nigeria. But agreements were signed, and the technical committee was supposed to be put in place to ensure the smooth implementation of this process. But in the street, the average business person that does importation from China has not benefited from this program. But of course, if you go and discuss with the central bank, you will also realize that the agreement was signed. The Chinese have done their own part, but I have a feeling that that money has been diverted to something else rather than to supporting the Nigerian businesses. This is exactly what I said earlier. Initiatives come up in the pretext that they are going to support Nigerian entrepreneurs, but often these initiatives are diverted for selfish ends.
All right. Well, when it comes to how...
So, in the conclusion, I don't really think that program has benefited entrepreneurs.
Okay. When it comes to how entrepreneurs should benefit directly from the currency swap that we are talking about right now, in what way, generally, can you make us understand? Is it making the yuan available on the streets of Nigeria, or making the Nigerian naira available on the streets of China? In that regard, the availability of the yuan to the people or to the private companies going into China, from that window, what is on ground?
But what is the process right now for Nigerians getting the dollar to do business in China? We have to adopt the same process. The central bank should make yuan available. The yuan is not internationally convertible currency. So that is why the specific negotiation with Nigeria on the swap deal. So Nigeria should make enough yuan available to the commercial banks and also to the Bureau de Change, so that the average businessman will have access to this currency to enable them to do business. Because in terms of the strength, the yuan, based on the agreement, is not as strong as the dollar. So it will benefit the entrepreneur to easily go to the bank, have access to yuan, or go to Bureau de Change, have access to yuan, and proceed to China to do whatever they want to do. But now it's not like that. And I'm sure that money is being either be diverted to other projects or other things instead of the purpose for which it was originally designed.
All right, let's look at our railway sector. From in 90s up to date, the Chinese have been involved in the quest for Nigeria to revamp the rail sector. From Abacha till now, some kind of deal, some kind of agreement, some kind of arrangement has been made with Chinese company. But the rails are not up and about. Is it the same thing that happened to yuan that's happening in the rail sector?
Well, when Nigeria signed a $2.5 billion deal on the railway project, of course, the company that brought the CCECC that brought the China Railway Corporation to Nigeria to be doing the project, the whole arrangement was based on loans and financing from the Chinese government. To the best of my knowledge, the Chinese have done their part on the railway part. In Lagos, they are doing the construction of the one around the light railway construction in Lagos is ongoing. The Kaduna Abuja railway construction is ongoing. The one coming from the airport is going. They have about 3 major railway construction programs that are ongoing in Nigeria. So I think they've made do with the railway this thing in terms of implementation. You can see that in Abuja here, for example, you see a lot of construction going related to the railway. So I think it's a project that is ongoing.
All right.
The only project the Chinese have done that have not been development as such is the oil deal in which they tried to acquire the Kaduna refinery, and that one never fell through successfully. But all other major infrastructure projects they've involved, the one in Mambila and others, I think the Chinese have followed up with their own promises, including the railway.
All right. Obviously, China has supported Nigeria's bid for the permanent seat at the UN Security Council, and it is one thing that Nigerians have been looking forward to. But let me ask you a question from there after the break. Let's go on a break and then we come back on this. Stay with us. We're discussing Nigeria-China relations right now. All right, if you're just joining us, you're watching TVC Breakfast. We are discussing Nigeria-China relations right now. We have with us in our Abuja studio the president of Nigeria Entrepreneurs Forum, Dr. Sydney Negbedion, joining us right now. All right, before we went on break, I was asking you that Nigeria has, or China has pledged his support for Nigeria's bid at the permanent seat in the UN Security Council. Now, we also know that Nigeria is not the only country bidding for that. We know the relations between China and South Africa, for instance, in their BRICS bloc and all of that. But in all of those, how can Nigeria take advantage of its relation with China to ensure that that pledge or that support from China keeps Nigeria on the front burner for that seat?
Well, Nigeria has a strategic partnership agreement with China. Part of that strategic partnership is what China is acting on to support Nigeria at the United Nations for Security seat. Nigeria has enjoyed tremendous positive relationship with China, just as Nigerian people like Chinese, so also Chinese like Nigerians. And so we believe that this relationship will continue because we have a lot of similarities in terms of resilience, in terms of the fact that we are developing countries, although they have gone a little bit higher than us now in terms of development. These are some of the advantages we have with them. Being the fact that the Chinese products easily enter Nigeria, they are making money in Nigeria, and their businesses don't really have major problems, the Chinese will continue to like us. But I think that in the course of the relationship, Nigeria must strengthen its line of argument by coming up with initiatives and aggressively pursuing these initiatives and using China as backup to achieving these initiatives. Because as time goes on, with the posturing of China, they are likely to be dominant in the world stage because the U.S. is technically pulling out. So before the U.S. eventually returns back, China will have acquired a lot of strength, better than it is now. And so Nigeria needs to be thinking about the kind of technology we need to also acquire from China to position ourselves in terms of armament, in terms of heavy industries, and in terms of those things you need to be able to become a world power.
All right, talking about strategic agreement, you remember that in 2006 and just this year, Nigeria put up a statement recognizing China as the only recognized authority in that part of the divide, talking about the Taiwan issue. What's your take on that?
Well, the One China policy is a policy that has been Nigeria alluded to many years ago. They just recently reaffirmed it. And it is a diplomatic position of Nigeria, and I think it's a sound position because every country has domestic problems. The Chinese see Taiwan as their own, and Taiwan intends to break out. Nigeria diplomatically supports that insofar as we are trading with Taiwan and Chinese are not bothered about it, it is enough for us. Nigeria will not want China to support the emergence of a group in Nigeria wanting to break away and wanting to go their own way. And we believe in our territorial integrity, and we will fight for it anytime, any day. So in the course of our relationship with other countries, any country that tend to support insurgents or attempt to break out of Nigeria, of course, Nigeria naturally as a nation will resist. This is exactly what China is doing. And so long as we are trading with Taiwan, and we also believe we subscribe to the One China policy, it is a win-win situation for both China and Nigeria.
Okay, all right, we'll come back to this. China will invest up to $40 billion in Nigeria as part of efforts aimed at deepening relations between both countries.
The amount, which was announced by China's Foreign Affairs Minister Wang Yi in Abuja, is in addition to other contributions China had made to Nigeria to support her developmental activities. It said this country had invested about $45 billion in various projects in the West African powerhouse and is at the verge of releasing another $40 billion.
Now, he described Nigeria and China as strategic partners whose relations, he noted, had developed well. An investment analyst with GTI Securities, Chukwuma Anyanwu, spoke to us earlier on the deal.
I think it's positive. Any infrastructure investment, any funding we can get by way of focus on infrastructure is something positive for Nigeria. We have a thorough lack of adequacy as far as infrastructure is concerned. Power is still at an all-time low. Transportation is ridiculous, and for a growing country like Nigeria, those are the key parameters that we need to sort out, before we can lay claim to being a fully fledged emerging economy.
All right, let me come back to you on this. Talking about the capacity of Nigerian private sector entrepreneurs, how much of capacity does Nigerian companies have going into China, apart from the exportation of agricultural consumable goods, agricultural products and all of that?
Well, you do not develop capacity unless you are interested in capacity, and you develop programs to suit each nations of the world. For now, we may not have the capacity, but once we identify that the Chinese market is a very huge market, 1.5 billion people is not a joke. If Nigeria can access 10% of that market, then of course it will enhance our economic earnings and our strength in the global community. So I believe that those areas where we need to develop competencies, Nigeria need to develop its own capacity. For example, the cassava industry. Many years ago, we talked about cassava, and when we tried to sell cassava to China, we realized that the orders from China in the next 20 years, Nigeria cannot meet the orders being placed by Chinese companies. Of course, that itself is room for Nigeria to develop capacity for processing of cassava and production of cassava destined for the Chinese market. So if that is to be done, then of course Nigeria is supposed to enable the relevant institutions to identify cultivators of cassava, processors of cassava, and then of course assist them to purchase necessary equipment to meet the Chinese standard, and then of course we start exporting to China. But these things have not been done. So you cannot develop capacity to a country that is desirous of a strong market entry, and you expect the entrepreneur to do it. Because if you look at the history of entrepreneur and the level of development, of course, it is now we are really encouraging the concept of entrepreneurship. They just believe in trading, but now we are moving beyond trading to say we need to produce. And if we have to produce, you need capital equipment. And who is going to give you the money? The banks are not giving the loan. There are no venture capital lending institutions in Nigeria. The Bank of Industry that are supposed to be doing all of this, most entrepreneurs that go try to seek all this funding will tell you the challenges they are going through. So a lot of restructuring needs to be done. We need to stop paying lip service and start getting serious.
Okay, let's
about
talk
global business, and that is.
Okay, let's talk on some lighter note now. The issue of the cultural center, Chinese cultural center in Nigeria. And when the center was established, the Chinese government promised to reciprocate by kind of opening up a language center, Igbo language center, precisely in Chinese. In China rather. How has that worked out?
Well, it is still the if you look at the Chinese interest in Nigeria and versus Nigerian interest in China, you have a lot of Igbo traders actually doing more trade in China. But in recent times, you will also see a shift. You see that the Chinese embassies in Nigeria, they are moving towards doing more things with most of the northern states than the eastern states. If you go to their embassies and their institutions, you have more, where you used to have a lot of Igbo employees, you now have more of northern employees. They are all Nigerians, but you will see a technical shift here on their own part. So because of that, you will not, it will also reflect on the language issue. Naturally, it depends on interest, because the entire global community is based on interest, and interest will shift based on timing and dynamics of the relationship. And right. Nigerian-China relations is dynamic. Nigeria may not be observing it, but for Chinese end, it is dynamic.
All right, talk to us about what is responsible for this strategic shift. Although it is all Nigeria and so it should all be supported, we know that China had already had an engagement with the University of Nnamdi Azikiwe University in Awka, where they have they've adopted China as one of their. They have a Chinese language section there where they learn China in Awka. And now, if this is moving to the north, it's still okay. But what is responsible for this shift that you talk about?
Well, let's get back to one of the questions we dealt with earlier that has to do with the problems in Guangzhou. If you get to Guangzhou, what we are going to have is you are going to have a lot of Igbo traders. You are going to have a lot of Igbo residents. You are going to have a lot of activities, more largely by the Igbos. And some years back, there was a physical engagement between the Igbo community in Guangzhou and the Chinese police authorities. And I know since that time, a lot of policy shifts have been made by the Chinese in terms of studying different cleavages in Nigeria and trying to relate to whoever they want to. But I don't really think this kind of question is desirable in this kind of this thing. But I think this should be issues that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Chinese need to really look into, because one of the relationships that needed to be developed and which is emerging, as you cited in the case of University of Awka, it has to do with education and cultural exchanges. We are thinking of moving out of just the basic trade and diplomatic relations to other aspects of relationship between Nigeria and China. And the cultural relationship, educational relationship is strategic. But in terms of educational relationship, why China is doing things with few Nigerian universities, if you go to East Africa, they are doing more. You go to other African countries, they are doing more. Okay. Even when the president visited China, the Chinese government promised that they will be training 1,000 Nigerians. They've started doing that, giving scholarship and everything, but we still believe that it is not enough.
Okay.
Because if you look at our population, if you look at the institutions that are available in China, especially in those areas that require technical education, for which Nigeria needs skills for, I think 1,000 Nigerians is not enough. So what we are having here is that the Chinese technically are rationing the number of people they give visas to. They are rationing the opportunities they are giving to Nigeria to have access to their opportunities in their country. Why in Nigeria we open our doors? You know, and I strongly believe that all these things need to be reviewed.
Okay, Dr. Sini Nebedion, President of Nigeria Entrepreneurs Forum, thank you very much for talking to us on this topic of Nigeria and China relations. Thanks for your time.